I would now like to turn and introduce our first speaker, who is joining us online. So we'll have a mixture of online presenters and in-person speakers today. Brigitte Sistig is from the Aotearoa Repair Cafe New Zealand, and she is going to share her experience with the establishment of the repair cafes in New Zealand, but also the networks that she has built. Thank you, Brigitte.
Yeah, I would like also to thank Leanne and your team to give us this opportunity to share with you and create this amazing conference and gathering for us all. Thank you very much. Repair Cafe Aotearoa New Zealand grew out of Repair Cafe Auckland and is now a national organization since 2020. If I could have the second slide, please. Kia ora. So here you can see a little map where we have the repair cafes scattered across the country. At the time when we created the map with the help of our collaborator, Environmental Hubs Aotearoa, we had 34 repair cafes with us registered, and they are continuously growing. So here you can see that you can click on the icon and it comes up with the information about each individual repair cafe, when it's run, who to contact, and what type of repair they offer you. Then we move to the next slide. Kia ora. And this slide I just like to share with you because, as you all know, who've been part of repair cafes, these local events are just so joyful. And so we're just sharing something across the ditch with you, some of our community repair joy. Kia ora. The next slide. This is a slide I would like to spend a little bit of time with you because it just shows you how embedded Repair Cafe Aotearoa is in our community. We are a member of and part of the New Zealand Zero Waste Network. We are committed to Te Tiriti o Waitangi and deeply embedded in the right to repair movement. Currently, we are not funded, so we are umbrellaed by the Zero Waste Network. However, we look after all the wonderful little repair cafes across the country. And we do this via e-newsletters, our Facebook, Instagram, and now we have a website as well, which is very helpful. One of our main partners is Parakore, which is the New Zealand Zero Waste Organization. We have a written agreement with Parakore with the intention to introduce repair cafes to Marae. If you could stay with the slide, that would be amazing. Thank you. So the intention is to introduce repair cafes to Marae and Maori organizations, and to see where the kaupapa, where the ethics and the operations may meet. We're also very interested to connect with the education sector, bringing repair into schools and also polytechnics. Currently, we're running 2 case studies at community recycling centers to see how repair of donated items could potentially work as a social enterprise. We are also connected with the businesses, and here in New Zealand we have got the Sustainable Business Network, who recently published the Circular Economy Directory, which we are part of. And so Repair Cafe Aotearoa offers businesses the opportunity to connect with the community, present their sustainable products, and also teach repairability of the products. This is just one example. Consumer New Zealand, the equivalent to Choice in your country, is a very close ally with us, and we are working together on the right to repair legislation. Councils in the Ministry for the Environment are places we seek funding for, and hopefully that will increase. I'm sure you appreciate that situation. You'll be in a similar situation. All the sharing spaces, we really support a sharing economy. And so we're connected to local tool libraries, maker spaces, Menshed, and also time banks. The right to repair, the international movement is a very great aspect of us, and I will talk to you about this a little bit later. If I could please have the next slide, that would be amazing. Okay, these are just our main collaborators. As I mentioned, Zero Waste New Zealand, the Repair Cafe Foundation, the international one. We have an MOU with Parakore, Waste Mints. This is a huge organization with members of the waste management industry, Environment Hubs Aotearoa and Consumer New Zealand. Next slide. It is our intention to develop Repair Cafe Aotearoa New Zealand as a tiriti o Waitangi collaborative organization. And so therefore we applied for funding through Auckland Council to run a workshop which offers education to our Repair Cafe organizers about the history, and next step will be the implication of Te Tiriti into our organization. Next slide, thank you. The Right to Repair in New Zealand, we have just delivered the Right to Repair petition to Minister David Parker, Minister for the Environment, on the 7th of July, and have been invited to write a submission to the petition office by the end of August. So this will keep us busy for a little while. However, we experienced a lot of support from the general community, and like you, we are intending to join the international community. So New Zealand will also have a legislation of the right to repair. Kia ora. Next slide, please. Here I just wanted to share with you one movement that we just started within the organization, and this is to bring together regional repair cafes. We were very fortunate to be able to hold a stall at the Festival for the Future in Wellington last weekend, which is a festival for young people. And so we were able to introduce community repair. And we had so many sign-ups and so much interest, and fantastic conversations. And indeed, the Repair Cafe organizers from the region of Wellington, there were 5 to 7 repair cafes coming together to get to know each other and to run the project together. So this is something we would really like to expand on, I think. In the last slide, please. I'd like to thank you for your attention. And if you wish, this is a link to our website, and I'd love you to visit it sometime and explore something about Repair Cafe Aotearoa. Thank you so much for your attention. Kia ora.
Thank you, Brigitte. Next, I would like, we are going to show you a pre-recording by Martina Posma, who first set up the Repair Cafe movement. So she is now responsible for the Repair Cafe International, which for those of you who work in repair cafes, you might be familiar with the digital package or the package that you can purchase from Martina and her organisation. It's a fantastic help with manuals and name tags and instructions about how to establish a repair cafe. As I said, we have 95 here in Australia, and every weekend there are people visiting them thinking, I could do this in my community. So there's ideas and people growing these new groups all of the time. So we thought we'd share with you a presentation that Martine gave as part of the Repair Cafe in the UK. And then we're going to invite Guido, who has an association with the International Repair Cafe movement, to have a bit of a chat as well. Thank you.
For many years now, our website, repaircafe.org, has provided a digital starter kit in 5 languages, which guides you step by step through the process of organizing and setting up a repair cafe. And next slide, please. This is the kit. It's a manual and lots of additional documents. And in the last 12 years, this kit has been used by thousands of volunteers worldwide. And if we could go to the next slide, then you'll see that this has resulted in almost 2,500 repair cafes that we know of in 40 countries across the globe, from the Netherlands to Australia and from the UK to South Korea and Japan. And this map, I know it's not complete, since not all repair cafes reported back to us after having started their own repair cafe. And meanwhile, there are also other separate organizations running similar networks on a regional or national scale. Next slide, please. Of course, there may be cultural differences in how the repair cafes in all these countries are run. For instance, as you can see on the right of this slide, in Bengaluru, they have an online schooling program for kids with a slightly different approach than we would have in the Netherlands. But the similarities between all these initiatives are much bigger than the differences. And the photo on the left, for instance, is from a repair cafe in South Korea. And that's a typical repair cafe picture that could have been taken anywhere. And such pictures always show the same key aspects. There are always rooms full of people and tools and broken items. There are people working together, concentrating. We see people proudly posing with their repaired item. And these are pretty much the same wherever you go. Next slide, please. And in the last few months, we have seen a true revival of repair cafes after the pandemic. And that's great, for we know that many repair cafe organizers have had trouble keeping their volunteers involved when it wasn't possible to come together for so long. And I know that many organizers were not sure that their volunteers would return. And no doubt a number of them have left and have found other activities to pursue. But it turns out that a great many of them have been very happy to get back to repairing at the local repair cafe. And luckily, we also see many people starting new repair cafes. Last year in 2021, we counted only 136 new repair cafes in our network, but in the first 6 months of this year, we have already seen an increase of 160 new repair cafes on the world map. So that's wonderful, although of course there is still room for many, many more. Next slide, please. Like in society as a whole, the pandemic has also accelerated certain developments within the repair cafe community. One is the use of online meetings, which several repair cafes have held during the pandemic, for people to ask questions or to get repair advice. And this was then done instead of the physical meeting. But in non-pandemic times, this could very well be an extra service that a repair cafe could offer apart from the physical repair meeting. In this scenario, you could come to the repair cafe with your broken item on, let's say, the first Saturday of the month. But if you had a question or you just wanted some advice, then you could, for instance, have an online chat with a volunteer on Tuesday evening. And this could really be an addition to the service that repair cafes offer to their community. Next, please. And we've also seen other changes during the pandemic. For instance, many repair cafes have organized their way of working more systematically, like Repair Cafe Redcliffe Peninsula in Australia. They ask visitors to pre-register their repair via an online form, and then they match items with specific repairers, and they give visitors a specific time slot too. During the pandemic, this was a good way to prevent rooms becoming too crowded, but this can also work in non-COVID times, for it enables volunteers to prepare for a certain repair, maybe to look up some information in advance or collect the right tools for the repair. And for the visitor, this could also work well for many people, like to have an appointment at a specific time rather than going somewhere without knowing how long they're going to have to wait. And these are all innovations that have come up during the pandemic, but may become part of the normal procedure of repair cafes. And I think that's very good, for such innovations can expand the repair infrastructure. And that's exactly what we need. We need a richer repair infrastructure to fit the circular economy. Next slide, please. And that's why I am also happy with other experiments that are now being carried out here in the Netherlands by repair cafes in collaboration with other organizations. For instance, we're running a pilot now called the Repair Studio. This is a picture of the kickoff event. And this project involves 4 local repair cafes and a large handyman chain store called Karwei. And the idea is that people in these 4 places can now not only go to the repair cafe with their broken items, but they can also bring them to the store, to Karwei. And there the volunteers will pick the items up, will repair them in their own time, and then will bring them back to Karwei where the visitor can collect them. And in this way, Karwei wants to stimulate repair and to contribute to their own goals in terms of sustainability. And for the repair cafe, it's a way to promote themselves locally, to repair more broken items, and also to raise some extra income. For Karwei donates €5 per repair to the local repair cafe. Next, please. And there are other experiments too. This is another picture from a thrift store in Apeldoorn, which is another city in the Netherlands. Here they have a repair cafe counter where you can book a session with a repairer every day. And these repairers work in the store and they have other tasks too. But when you book a session on, let's say, Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock for your vacuum cleaner, they will make sure that there is a repairer with the right skills available at that time to take a look at your vacuum cleaner together with you. So these are all slightly different ways of working than in a traditional repair cafe, but I think we need all these additional experiments to enrich the repair infrastructure and find out which approach works best. Next, please. For eventually, the circular economy needs a repair infrastructure that is as rich and as diverse as the infrastructure for buying new items. So yes, we do need repair cafes where you can go once a month, once a week for free, and where you can have an inspiring repair experience, and where you can learn how to fix your own things, how to take care of items, and how to maintain them. But we also need repair services where you can drop an item off and pick it up later. And these services need not be free. It's perfectly okay to pay for a repair, but it should be an affordable fee and not €50 for an item which costs 70 or which costs €30 in the shop. Next slide, please. So I think at this moment we're in a transition phase where people begin to understand that repair is really important and should not exclusively be a volunteer activity. People begin to understand that there should be other services too, and that we badly need professional repairers in the circular economy of the future, and that these professionals need to be schooled today. So that's why, next slide please. For some years we have been pushing for the reintroduction of repairing as a school subject in the Netherlands, and we're working together with education professionals to reintroduce this subject at vocational schools. We're meeting a lot of enthusiasm and of course a lot of hurdles too. So it will take some more time to get this done, but we're on the way there and we're very dedicated to it. And the same with Right to Repair, which we promote as much as possible. The best way for us to do this is to keep showing that more and more people want to make repairs and want products that can be repaired. And I think that the ongoing growth of the Repair Cafe network provides the best evidence of this and constitutes the strongest argument for taking measures in favor of repair. And therefore, I can only encourage you all to keep doing your wonderful work and to keep inspiring your local community to join you. And that's it for me for now. Thank you.
We thank Martine for the permission to play that. That was part of another presentation, but she did grant us permission to play that as part of the context of what is happening internationally and really the roots of the community repair movement. I'd now like to invite Guido Verbist to come up. Guido, you probably well know. Guido was responsible for our Australian petition on right to repair, which you might talk a little bit about, but is also affiliated with the international repair movement as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, good afternoon. I'm indeed, I'm going to talk more about my previous job than my current job, actually, because I'm currently managing a new startup business called Revolve Recycling, not recycling. And recycling stands for bikes that we repair and rehome and return to the market. I'll talk about that a bit later. But I want to go back to my time at the Bauer. We now have 95 repair cafes, and in 2014, I set up the first repair cafe in Marrickville, in the headquarters from the Bauer Reuse and Repair in Sydney. And that was kind of at the time seen as an innovative thing. It caught a lot of media attention for a small thing, but okay, it was the start of something big. And it was actually very quickly picked up by a lot of councils as a concept they wanted to share with all the local residents they had. And it's interesting to see that now with Martine and even Brigitte in her, I'm not sure she mentioned it in her presentation, but in communication I've had with her, we are all thinking now about moving from being volunteering as a community group as becoming a more financially sustainable business model. And in fact, I had introduced that in 2014 already, because all councils were very happily paying for the services we provided. And I paid the facilitators who did the repairs, because you can't continue to rely on just people doing it in their free time or having all the tools and all the infrastructure available at no cost. There are limits to how much you can do that. And definitely if you want to fit in the new, what they call now new, the circular economy, which is the new business, the new financial model, there is a place for repair, and we should claim, in fact, that place, not keeping it as a charity initiative, but as a purely financial business model that we contribute to. So I've already done that at the time, in fact, back in 2014. And even during the pandemics, we turned into online repair cafes, and again it was picked up by all the councils and distributed along a lot of people. We had close to 3,000 people every year attending the repair cafe, so it was actually quite a big thing. It's a bit less currently, and that has to do with COVID, but also changes in the organization. But in addition to providing this service and helping out the communities, we actually also had a more holistic approach to the problem with goods that are not meant to be repaired and sometimes not repairable. So we introduced in the Right to Repair petition. That was the very first talk about having something on a political level, that there should be a consideration made by the government to legalize some aspects that would give the right to individuals to have their items repaired. And we did refer to what was happening at the time in Europe. In Sweden, there has and still is a tax deductibility legislation in place where people who ask some repairs to do the repairs, they can deduct the cost from their taxable income. In France at the time was also the introduction made of at least 2 years that the manufacturers had to provide spare parts, and that had to be labeled on the packaging so that the customer could choose between yes or no. But in the end, they all had to do it. So those were steps that were already back at the time introduced. France has gone further. Now we will talk tomorrow more about that. But those are the things that we, in our petition at the time, were putting to the government. And the Greens, and more specifically here in the ACT, Shane Rattenberg, who was the then Minister for Environment, had picked up on that petition, and he actually was running with it himself and also talking to the government with Jos Frydenberg at the time as the minister in charge. And indirectly, I think out of that has also come then this concept of the Productivity Commission that the government has introduced, and as an initiative for a year that has been established. Well, they worked for a full year. I've been interviewed many times by the Commission, and I have made many submissions. And then there was the end result. And I know Leanne mentioned it here, that there were quite a good set of recommendations that came out of it, and also some sectors that were kind of pitched as important to support in the first place, and the car industry, the agriculture industry. However, I actually think that the community sector was largely left out of any of the recommendations that they made. They actually hardly talked about it. And it was driven by what is, from a financial and economical value, the most important sectors to support, and that's what they have focused on to make some recommendations. And even those recommendations, in many ways, was talking about further investigation on viability of all of this, and even the aftermarket for the car industry will be evaluated in a year. So there is still some question marks, but the big disappointment, in my view, was that the community groups were left out, and the example in Scotland and Ireland prove that there is place to do something for that as well, which has not yet been considered here by the Australian government. So I think there is still work to be done for us as a community. What I also think is interesting to keep in mind here, and I've picked this up myself from a seminar that Leanne organized in Brisbane a couple of years ago, with some lawyers from all over the world coming together, looking at the legal side, like with the right to use certain patents and certain software that is privatized, and if you don't access or can't access it, you actually can't do any repair. So that was a big part of that topic. But I learned from those presentations that there is actually a big difference between how in the US and in Europe is looked at the right to repair. In Europe, it's primarily driven from an environmental perspective, where they want to improve the environmental impact, or reduce, I should say, the environmental impact. Where in the US, it's primarily driven from the perspective of employment creation and protecting certain industries. And that's what I think is happening here in Australia as well. It's the American model or approach that you see primarily, and the environmental aspects are not really present. In fact, in the Productivity Commission final report, the word environment is not even mentioned. So they don't take it, from that perspective, very serious. And I think there is still work, again, to be done by community groups. But at the same time, I think the big challenge that the community sector also face, and here, not just here, but globally, and it was mentioned by Martine, is this element of say paid for services you pay for. That it shouldn't continue to be something that you just do as a volunteer and as a charity. I think we all deserve to be taken more serious. And I think we come a long way with the circular economy now being trendy. At the time, it was even a weird word that nobody had heard of when we started the first Repair Cafe, but now everybody wants to be part of it, and we should claim our role and our place in it. And we should kind of argue the case and start implementing it step by step, that it is fair to be paid for that service. But it's also our duty and our obligation to find a way that it is financially sustainable. We not just have to look at it from an environmental sustainable perspective, also from a financial aspect. And I think the current job I'm doing, and I will stop with that, is actually an example of that, I think. And this is one of the reasons I moved on to what I'm currently doing, Revolve Recycling, where we actually try to demonstrate that it is financially sustainable, that you can develop with reuse, recycling, repair, a sustainable business model. It requires much more thinking and testing and negotiations with commercial companies to see how you can turn things into a sustainable business model, but there is room to do it. And I think that's what the challenge is for us, to do that. We of course need to look at the environmental aspect, but equally important is going to be the financial sustainable aspect. And again, we should not just stop with looking at the end of life of a product, but also at when the product is designed. And then there's the productivity commission, the product stewardship programs that are in Australia a strong tool for that, where you can bring the manufacturers on board and make them responsible for designing and introducing products that are repairable. So I think that's another part of what we need to be part of, that we need to argue. And again, this is what Revolve Recycling is doing as well. We are preparing a scenario for a bike, specific for bikes, a product stewardship scheme. We do a lot of repairs, and we are even now able to prove that quality bikes, second-hand quality bikes, repaired bikes, are as financially viable or in the same range of prices as the big box retail bikes that you can buy in Kmart. And I don't know what you know about that, but those bikes are not meant to last. They are on average lasting 90 hours, and then you have to throw them away. They are not repairable because the parts are of a poor condition, and sometimes it's not even possible to assemble them properly, that you can drive them safely. So there are a lot of issues, but reality is that 50% of the bicycles that are sold in Australia are those big box retail bikes. So that's another topic we need to be aware of, and I think in all our sectors where we are active, whether it is electronic appliances or furniture, you need to look at that as well. The import from overseas, the cheap import, the poor conditions it is coming with, that needs to be addressed as much as it has to be addressed that we have the right to be paid for what we do. So that's kind of, I think, the big challenge for us, to find a way here to be taken a bit more serious, and not just expecting it, but also demonstrating it and finding ourselves ways to prove that what we do is financially sustainable and possible to continue with. This topic is also going to be an international issue, because Martine, I'm working with her actually. I'm kind of an external advisor to her board, and she asked me to prepare a document together with Brigitte, actually from New Zealand, about this specific topic about should we start claiming financial return for repairs we do as a community group. And my position is clear. I will argue in favor, and so that paper will be distributed somewhere in September globally, and will be part of the conversation that we will have with everybody then. And that's it. Voila. thought I should share with you guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Guido. It's great to get that perspective, given your history of connection with Right to Repair in Australia and with Shane as well. I think what the plan was today to really enable and to facilitate discussion. So we've left plenty of time for our online participants to submit questions so that we can share some of these experiences and challenges around repair. We've only spoken about repair cafes, but we know that there is a lot of community repair that's happening outside the repair cafe movement. So there's really good examples with some of the local councils where there's actually with the waste and resource recovery centres where there's a repair shop that's being established alongside the waste and resource centre, so that when people are taking their waste to effectively what we used to know as the dump or the tip, that perhaps white goods or appliances could be saved and perhaps repaired at the point of potentially disposal. So there's lots of, and those issues about cheap imports coming into Australia or poor quality or poor design of products is very much something that the fashion industry is obviously struggling with as well. Mending and the role of mending, almost every repair cafe that I have visited has a very strong mending, sewing component, which is so important to the community as well. And very much part of this ongoing discussion around skills training as well. The need, certainly within the automotive industry, has moved on. They've got their first right to repair law, but it's very much also about making sure that we have the technical skills and ability to conduct the repairs that need to be done. So this is time for the next half an hour that we've devoted to open discussion with Brigitte and Guido. Also, I'll invite you back up to answer any questions. If we have some questions through Slido, we have people here who can read out the questions, and I'll repeat them for the purposes of everyone here. Do we have some questions in the room to begin with, perhaps? Or questions or comments, I think. You've all got some experience here. I think it's great. Just one example, we have Monica here who works with the University of Canberra Repair Cafe, or set it up. Is that correct? Yes. This is also something I think that has a lot of potential, is that think about every university campus here in Australia or even internationally. The students from every discipline, staff experts from every discipline on campus, what a fantastic opportunity to do some work integrated learning for our students and mentoring for our staff across a skills level within the university sector. I'm interested and have registered a repair cafe for Griffith University. I know that there is also one operating at University of Queensland as well. So there's scope there for growing that repair network. But I'll open it to questions or comments, please.
I'll kick things off. David.
I think, can you, I think for the benefit of everyone, that if you can put, can you use Slido to, have you got a device you can type the question? Oh, sorry. Or you can ask your question.
People online will be able to hear me, will they, if I use this?
Yes.
David Neal from the Bega Repair Cafe. We too, Guido, are battling with this issue of, do we start charging for some of the, especially the more technical services around electronics repair? But then there's that balancing act. We don't have any other electronics repairers in our area, so people do come to us. But bicycles, we do have a bicycle shop in town, and certainly they service the high-end bicycles. Have you sort of dealt with that balancing act between, if we start charging for our services, are we actually competing with organisations that are already providing that service?
Yes, I'm aware, I understand what you mean with that. And I don't think we should replace what exists already. We should complement what is there and find. That's our challenge, basically, to find that niche where we complement. Because we, like, to speak then about our current business model, we don't accept bikes from people that are not bought with us to repair them. We send them back to repairers that are in the community already active. And we encourage even that people do that. We see our role as helping getting people onto bikes and familiarizing and feeling confident and positive about biking again, and giving them access to good quality bikes, and then following them through and supporting them through that phase, that time they are biking. So we will service their bikes and we will educate them in how to service their own bike. And then, yes, the bikes that come back from our people, we will continue to support and repair them. But we for us, it's because we want to have the bikes rehomed that we do that. So, and that's the environmental agenda we have. It's diverting it from landfill. That is our objective. That's why we exist. So if we stick to that role and then look at elements or services in the extent of that objective, you don't compete, I think, with existing services, because others don't really think along those lines. Even the traditional bike shops and bike repair services not even have a proper waste management system for their own waste. And we are actually also assisting them with better triage and selection and reusability of their own spare parts. So again, that's an additional service that's not competing with the existing, that's improving them. And I think that's, you see that in other sectors as well, where reuse, repair, waste management becomes kind of a customized service that we need to develop, where you go in much more detail in one specific than to stay at the service and be generic. So we invest a lot of time in learning how we can help the existing bike shops, how we can help the fleet operators with doing better work with end of life of their bikes, and then returning all those bikes that are normally going to go to landfill. We did research, and we know that in just Sydney Metropolitan, there are 30,000 bikes sitting, waiting to go to landfill. And nationwide, it's 800,000. So nobody would do anything with that. We just make that a financial return. We create a commercial value out of it, actually. And we work with the existing repair. So. And I think it's a challenge. I'm not going to dispute that, but this is where we need to be conscious about our own role, that we bring an added value, and that we have to find ways to do that in each of our own sectors where we are specialized in. You see a lot of with timber now as well. A lot of businesses step up and start recycling timber and reusing it for furniture.
I'll give you an example. Sewing machines. They're a very complex machine when you get inside of them. And people have probably vintage sewing machines, but they're still beautiful machines. We've developed a good working relationship with the one sewing machine mechanic in our whole region. And so when people come to us, we'll often say, look, it's not something as simple as the bobbin or the needle. This needs a specialist person to look at it. And often they're unaware that this person actually existed. So it's actually ensuring that these sewing machines do get repaired. They don't end up in landfill or dumped. It's supporting that other service provider in the area.
Yeah.
And we're starting to get the reputation that if you've got something that's broken, go to the repair cafe. If they can't fix it, they'll tell you where to go to get it fixed.
Exactly. That's the way to go. Now that you mentioned that, I have even been thinking, but didn't get to the point. There is Airtasker, where you can call on for. We should have Repair Tasker as well. And that's a network where everybody is available, and you can put your call out for whoever is available to do it. I've been thinking about doing it, but maybe you guys can do it.
Brendan knows.
Okay.
Brendan, you're there, yes. That idea is essentially what Brendan is doing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's the idea that came to me when I started Fixable was exactly that, Guido. I firmly believe that people with great repair skills should be remunerated for those skills. So that was the initial idea behind Fixable, and we're kind of just moulding it in response to feedback at the moment, but that's still a very big part of it.
All right, my name's John August. I'm involved with the Pirate Party of Australia, but I suppose there's a lot of things that I think about on hearing all that. One is that, you know, in a sense, our economy is going a bit strange. I mean, look at all the people dumping their white goods outside of units when they move. Some of it perhaps needs to be repaired, but some of it is perhaps perfectly good. And in a perverse sort of way, some things in our economy are too cheap and the whole thing is out of whack, I suppose. You know, the other thing, I hear that story about these cheap bicycles, and I wonder if under a consumer law you could even argue those bikes are not fit for purpose because the life on them is so small. And another thing, you know, we were talking about the Productivity Commission, that it's focusing on dollar costs. And we have environmental things, and the fact that when people do stuff, it's not valued in the economy because there's no exchange of dollars and effort, but there's still value that is growing and value that is being generated, but the Productivity Commission is sort of blind to that. And we might also say it's blind to environmental issues. But the other thing I also think is, you know, there has been a business model before now of people doing shoe repairs in shopping centres, and that was very financial, and perhaps what we're doing is moving that model away from shopping centres to people operating out of homes and school halls and whatnot. And, you know, that's quite practical that might happen. But the thing is, the whole shoe repair thing, I mean, that was vaguely financial in times past. And why can we not make this general repair thing happen? But, you know, there are reasons people will do things. One is because they're passionate, that drives a lot, and the other one is for a financial return. And, you know, both of those things, I have to say, are acceptable. Some of what goes on in our society is driven by passion. A lot is driven by financial reward. So that's a bunch of ideas that I put there. But, yeah, the Productivity Commission, they're worth considering, but they're also leaving a fair bit out.
If I can add to what you were just saying, it made me thinking about there's a growing willingness and awareness amongst the communities and the population in general that repair is the right thing to do. And more and more people are willing to pay a bit for having an item repaired. And so that's encouraging. And I think we are on the right track, even though that the Productivity Commission might have missed the opportunity to insert anything about that. It's not going to stop. As long as we continue to tell the story, to inform people about the full life cycle of an item, that they know what happens with it at the end of life, they will then understand that it is better to try to give it a second life. And we see that again with our bicycles and with a lot of electronic appliances. That was the same. If there is a possibility to do it within a financial limitation, of course, that it is acceptable for people to pay for it, they will prefer to buy than an item that is repaired. So I think the opportunities are there. It's just up to us to continue investing in it and offering and thinking about better ways to make it accessible. And Repair Tasker could be a scenario to do that.
Okay, well, I'll just try to say one or two more things. I mean, there is the bigger economy, these ideas about productivity in the economy, GDP, how GDP is measured, and how, you know, these sorts of initiatives might fit in with that. So, you know, that is another part of the story. And I can't remember the other point I was going to make, but I'll leave it for other people to say something.
Hi everyone, I'm Karen. I'm an honours geography student from the University of Sydney, and I'm interested in knowing if this proposition to remunerate volunteers is coming from volunteers or more the project organisers and founders of these repair cafes, because I guess you could say volunteers are largely driven by their passion and love for the social cooperative and the kind of values that are instilled in that, such as like community community spirit, environmentalism. So, yeah, are they really looking for kind of a financial incentive on top of that, or it's just kind of the larger organisers that believe that should be part of the model?
Is Karen online? Karen, because she might be interested to respond to this. I'm not sure if you hear this, Karen. Can she respond? Is she able to talk? No, she's probably not able to talk. Because she's one of the people on our committee, and she also has expressed at some point that there's a limit to how much you can do voluntarily. It's not that people don't want to do it, but there's so much you can do, and you're only X hours a day or X hours a month available for those kind of things. And even in the Bauer time and the repair cafes, there were volunteers working alongside paid people, and that was perfectly fine. There were people that said, "Look, I'm fine with whatever income I have. I don't need it." But given that there's so much more interest in having items repaired and that people came to us, we had to find people that could actually dedicate the proper time and choose that as a job almost over any other job. And then you can also invest in training and upscaling and having more tools, which wouldn't be possible if you don't have a return from your input you make. So it's not that you should exclude volunteering, but there is a lot more that can be done. And it's the same again, if I talk then again about Revolve recycling with the bicycles. It's not that we have invented something new. Repairing bikes has happened as long as there exists. But it's the fact that there are many more that are not looked after, that are thrown away. And even the menschettis and all the volunteer groups that are looking after bikes are limited again. Some of them are coming now to us and want us to take over their overflow of bikes they have, that they can't handle it themselves. So it's in addition, it's complementary that all of this is needed. And I think if we want to become part of the circular economy model, we need to claim our space there. There is place for it, there is an interest for it. We just have to give it ourselves the infrastructure and the capacity to do it at a professional level.
Thank you. John Gertzakis from the E-Waste Watch Institute. I think Karen's question's a good one because to me it highlights that repair is a very diverse and rich area, and there is much, much more to repair and what can be achieved than just self-repair. I think self-repair and community initiatives are really important, and those that want to do it should do it and be better resourced, and the investment should be there to support them. But until you look at particular product categories and what's required in those areas, I know my elderly neighbours, they don't want to go to a repair cafe, but they do want their microwave fixed in a cost-effective way. So it's not always about self-repair. So I think it's important to acknowledge the diversity and richness of what repair can be. And I didn't interpret your proposition as contested, that no. It's one or the other. I think you can have volunteers driving it, you can have people that are resourced and paid to do it on a commercial basis. But I think as long as we keep it in, it's all just self-repair, and I know today's the community day, it limits the opportunity and the measurable bigger benefit of what repair can achieve.
Hi. Environment. So we're talking about making repair cafes financially viable in the future, and that's a fantastic direction. Do we see this as the ideal future, or we see this as an interim step to having the producers or suppliers themselves taking responsibility for repair and shifting it back to producer responsibility rather than it being this disconnected thing where they don't have the accountability for it?
Yeah, I don't know if Brigitte wants to say something about this, because you also have asked a question to the international movement. Or can you hear me, Brigitte?
Yes, I can. Now, what I wanted to mention is like, I guess, our intention is now to really develop a repair culture, on all levels. And so the Repair Cafe movement, is growing, as you, Guido, sort of like described really, really well. So for us, it is as well, like council, we have community recycling centers, and they offer a repair space. And this will be, managed by paid staff. So this will be growing. The same, in schools, we are starting to introduce, repair programs like Martine was describing as well. So really, what I'm saying is, I think, times are changing and quite quickly. Repair is something that's very tangible and anyone can relate to it. And it's easy to implement. And it's also an interesting, activity to engage in as well. So yes, I'm very hopeful, and I think it's got, it's just a wonderful entry into the circular economy into change. Thank you.
Add to that on your second part of your question about the responsibility of the manufacturers. Yes, that's an essential part of the story. I mentioned end of pipe. What community groups do is at the end of life usually only happening so far, where you try to extend the life of an item or return it into one old to one new. But if you really want to be consistent with what you preach there, you actually have to look at the full life cycle of the item from when it is designed till the end of it. And that means you need to start working on the manufacturer side. And that's where the whole story with product stewardship, what John represents here, is all about, where you actually put the manufacturers with all the other stakeholders around the table and make them responsible for designing products that are easier to repair or make money available to allow other people to do it. And you can have them, here in Australia, you can have them either on a voluntarily basis, and some exist where the sector, the manufacturers have, together with some of the other stakeholders, on a voluntary basis agreed on such a scheme. And they contribute to that. They for every item they sell in a country, they put a percentage aside, and that pot of money is used to then look after the products once they come to the end of their life. And then there is a budget to handle that. The latest, one of the latest where I'm involved in is the e-bikes with the batteries. There's now a scheme in place for all those batteries to be recycled. And that's a mandatory one, that's legislated, because that's the alternative. If the sector doesn't come together on their own, the government can step in and make it mandatory. It's a slow process, it takes some years to get to that, but that's what I think is equally important. That we look after that and help with the design. I've been involved with the University of Sydney in a seminar where design was the topic. And there's a lot that can be done at that level as well, how you improve that part. But so yes, I agree. There's many facets and many aspects to look at.
Sorry, thanks. Thanks, Vito. I'm just conscious of the time at 2:30 because we would like to move on to the next session.